Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and welcome to our Great Big History podcast and our special edition, History 150, Modern East Asia, the history of modern East Asia. In this episode, we're going to talk about the effects of the Mongols on China, Japan, and Korea. And so, we start with China. What the Mongols did was obliterate the Jin dynasty. Now, what had happened is the Tang dynasty, which is big China. The Tang were these military leaders who had united China in the 700s. They had collapsed. China broke apart, as it does. And the winner of that was the Song dynasty and had united China. Now, this was a bit of a smaller China, meaning it was more Han, it was more Chinese, and less of these like Tibetans, and less of Vietnamese, and less of other peoples. The Song dynasty is a high period of invention. The 1100s, the 11th century is this high period, the compass and print and these great Chinese inventions. Science is huge in the Song dynasty. But part of what happened was the Song dynasty split. Northern China, north of the Yangtze River, split away. So this is where Beijing is today. This is where Manchuria is not part of China yet. But this is where Beijing is. That part north of the Northern River was split away, and then it was conquered by a Manchurian-based tribe called the Jurchen. Jurchen. And they created a Chinese dynasty called the Jin. So they ruled northern China, the cities of northern China, as settled barbarians. These are the first people that Genghis Khan is going to destroy. And he's going to destroy them because, one, they laughed at him. Two, they themselves are not Chinese. They themselves are cousins to the Mongols. And they're like the Turks who beat up Temujin. They're like, when they start getting the diplomats from Genghis Khan saying Genghis Khan is the greatest chief in the whole wide world, the Jin are like, no, we own China. We're better than you. You're a bunch of horse people out in the west. We're horse people in the north. We're better than you. You're our little cousin. And so there was this traditional contest among nomadic horse tribes. One is not going to submit to the other. And so what the Mongols eventually did was invade and destroy them, partly with the aid of Chinese engineers, highly paid Chinese engineers. The Mongols will go west. Genghis Khan will die. They will destroy the Muslim kingdoms in Central Asia. Genghis Khan's youngest son will take over, and the Ogedai, Ogeddia, Ogedai, Ogedai, will take over. He's got two older brothers. The one eldest son. And basically what the eldest son and the middle son did was look at each other and say, you cannot take over. Again, this is one of those things that lends credence to that the eldest son wasn't the natural born son, because the middle son, if the eldest son isn't a natural born son of Genghis Khan, then the middle son can claim being the eldest son. Now, there's not primogeniture in this. In these, you have to be able to command the forces. And so what this looked like was civil war was about to happen. And basically it's the Life cereal commercial where it's give it to Mikey. Mikey likes it. It's basically both brothers are about to murder each other, and they go, well, wait, what about Ogedai? What about our youngest brother? Will you take orders from him? And the middle brother says, yeah, sure. Will you take orders from him? And the eldest son says, yeah, of course. And so Ogadai becomes universal Khan. Now, what he did was let the two brothers do what they wanted, basically. One went into the Middle East. The other one went off into Russia. The eldest son goes off into Russia. The middle son goes off into the Middle East, I believe. And they wreck the place. They just do what Mongols do. And meanwhile, there's a Song dynasty trying to get its act together. The Song dynasty is below the rivers. It's creating a navy. It's like, we'll defend. We're gonna get this back. Don't worry. We're these barbarians. China, just you, North China. We're coming. And yeah, and what happens is the attention of the Mongols is in the West, the Middle East, the utter destruction of what is going on in the Middle East, and the utter destruction of what is going on in Russia, in Europe. The Mongol tribes will get as far as Hungary. I mean, they get into Central Europe. There's a story that's told that they got in view of Vienna, the capital of Germany at the time, the largest city of Central Europe. That they got within scouting distance. I mean, that's Central Alpine Europe. They crush a Polish army. They crush a Hungarian army on the same day, 800 miles apart. I mean, the Mongols could just obliterate whoever they wanted. It's in fact the death of Ogadai forced all the Mongols to come back to Mongolia to figure out who the next great Khan would be. And what happens is the Mongols will split up. It's too big of an empire, and the grandsons don't know each other and they don't like each other. So it makes sense, right? You can understand the brothers, right? They all grew up with dad, Genghis Khan. They saw him build his empire, and of course they're sitting there, and I'm sure Genghis Khan, Temujin is like, remember, always love your mother and love each other. You only have each other in the world. And those kind of lessons. Like, all you have is each other. You could always depend on your brothers and your mom. Love your mom. Respect your mom. You know? The grandsons, on the other hand, you know, some are in Russia. They're growing up in Russia, destroying the Russians. They're growing up in the Middle East. They're seeing Islam. Others are in Mongolia or in North China. Like, they're thousands of miles apart. They don't hang out all that much. It's like you and your cousins. Like, you and your brothers and your sisters may be close. But how close are you to your cousins? And how close are you to your cousins' cousins? And so it is the grandsons that will break apart. And then the great-grandsons of Temujin who will break apart the Mongolian Empire. Because they simply were looking out for themselves. They're like, I'm in Russia, I want my stuff. I'm in the Middle East, I want my stuff. I'm in Mongolia, I want my stuff. And so Kublai Khan, a grandson of Temujin, will take the North Chinese Mongolian army and invade the Song and destroy it. Utterly obliterate it. He'll invade Korea. He'll invade Japan. And he will create the Yuan dynasty, the Mongolian dynasty, the first subservient Chinese dynasty to a larger empire. Now, there were foreign leaders, nomadic leaders even, of China before. There are foreign dynasties. But this is the first time where China is absorbed into something bigger, where it's not China in charge with just foreigners as emperor. No. This is foreign leaders absorbing China into their even larger empire. And that had never happened before, and it hasn't happened since. So you can understand that this is a massive humiliation. This is going to be a massive humiliation. we're going to talk about Yuan China when we talk about China next. What is the effect on Japan? The effect on Japan is to scare the woohoo out of Japan. In 1274, they're going to be invaded from Korea by 30,000 Mongols, Koreans, and Chinese. Again, this shows the Mongols could mobilize a whole lot of horsemen, but they were willing to hire others. They knew what they didn't know. The Koreans are famous warriors, good with high technology, good with gunpowder, better than the Chinese were. Experienced engineers, the Chinese, experienced engineers, good at blowing up cities. And they fight the Battle of Bunai. It's indecisive. It's on a beachhead. It's a small area. It's like the Battle of Marathon, where the Persians. The funny thing is, the invasion is kind of like the the Persian invasion of Athens. They're on the beach. They have this massive army. They can't spread out. They can't get horses. Need a lot of empty room. They can spread out. They can't spread out. It's an indecisive battle. They can't use their larger numbers against the Japanese. The Japanese have them bottled up. And then a kamikaze, the divine wind, a typhoon comes, a giant hurricane comes and scatters the ships, and the Mongols leave rather than be stuck and then starve. They get back on the ships, get out, go back to Korea. All that did was make the Mongols mad. Anytime you were dumb enough to defeat the Mongols, bad things then happened. And in 1281, Kublai Khan invades again, this time with 100,000 Mongols, 50,000 Chinese, and 20,000 Koreans. Probably not the real numbers, but what we're saying is it was bigger than 1274, and this is just like the Persian invasion of Greece. Xerxes' invasion is way bigger than it's probably on the same order. The Persian army was 250,000, and we kind of accept that as the number. So maybe these are the numbers. But we're talking about a whole lot of Mongols, 50,000 Chinese. Basically, the Mongolian Eastern Army is doing this. So if they can land, they will obliterate whatever they can. 20,000 Koreans. They invade with the Chinese fleet that they have taken over from the Song. So now they have a fleet rather than just the ships that the Jin had. Now they have the Chinese fleet, one of the largest fleets China will ever build. And they hit the beachhead. They go to the same place. And they go to the same place because there aren't a lot of places to land with 200,000 troops. It's also nearby, near Korea. Normandy was the same way. There were only 2 or 3 places where the invasion of Normandy could have happened. One is at Calais, one is at Normandy, and one is in Brittany, I think. Where you can land 1 million people or 500,000 troops. There weren't that many places. So the Germans knew what to defend. So part of what Eisenhower was trying to do was make them defend the wrong one. So the Japanese basically just defended the various different places and waited for the Mongolians to come back. Same thing happens. There's an indecisive battle, and again, another kamikaze, a typhoon comes in, just wrecks the fleet. The Mongolians have to go back. This is seen as a religious salvation. Japan is saved. But it scares the Japanese. Yes, they were saved this time. But they saw the overwhelming force of the Mongolians. And so the idea is that Korea and the sea must be controlled and or subdued. You cannot allow another invasion from Korea. If a greater power owns Korea, they can invade Japan. So Japan is going to have to own this. Now, we will see this in part 2 of our class when Japan modernizes. in the near term, Japan can't do much about this. They're not going to be able to fight the Yuan. They're not going to be able to fight the Ming. And they're definitely not going to be able to fight the Qing, the Manchu dynasty, for control of Korea. But once they industrialize, their goal, almost immediately, is to control Korea. The local lords, they won. And they become independent. They are more decisive in the victory than the central government of Japan. Than the emperor, then they're not yet a shogun, but the guy who would be shogun, those kind of titles. And this is just like the Vikings. In many ways, this is like the Vikings. The local lords had to raise the money, had to build the defenses, had to build their own armies to protect themselves. And so basically, they turned around and said, I'm going to do what I want. And the emperor, the central government said, no, you should do what we want. And the Kyushu lords said, come over here and make us. We who just defeated the Mongols, because there's now that bravado. And the central government said, oh, okay, maybe not. We'll not do that. And so what will happen is Japan breaks up. The lords, the Kyushu lords, who are much more powerful, basically when they're independents, and lesser lords start going, well, maybe the central government doesn't have to be listened to. Buddhism becomes stronger, again, because of the religious connection to the victory. Buddhism becomes stronger. It takes on credit. Buddhist monks take on credit for the kamikaze storms. There's also the thinking that Yuan China is clearly superior. And so some parts commit piracy. They're like, well, they have more money. They have more stuff. They have more things. So why don't we take it? Other parts trade and import learning from China. Other parts are more like, we don't need to do the piracy, violent stuff. Let's just trade with them. Let's buy their stuff. We'll hire their professors. And so there is this connection to Yuan China. Japan is now at the end of this road. It's at the end of not quite the Silk Road, but at the end of this globalized Mongolian cultural stuff. Gunpowder will come. It will disappear and come back with the West. But these ideas, these inventions from China, Yuan China is scary, but clearly superior. And so the idea is some parts, remember Japan is breaking up. And so some parts go, well, let's exploit that and let's steal from them. Let's steal the stuff we want. Other parts are, let's trade and learn from them. What about Korea? Korea is devastated by the Mongolian invasion. 1231, the Mongol horde under Ogadai, Ogedei, but you could do AI too. Ogadai, under Ogadai himself, invades Korea and just runs roughshod through, even though it's a mountainous country, just runs roughshod right through it. Korea is conquered, it's occupied. Because it's so mountainous, a guerrilla war will break out, and with that comes brutal reprisals. So you kill one Mongol, the Mongols kill 10 Koreans or 100 Koreans. And this keeps going for 40 years. The Mongolians own Korea because of what we'll see next. But if you were a mercenary, if you were a lord who wanted to exploit people disliking the Mongols, geography was your friend. And so there's an ongoing low-end Robin Hood type guerrilla war going on that never threatens to overthrow, never threatens to push out the Mongols. Never. But the idea of it was face saving. We are not submitting. We are not part of this empire. We're not China. The Yuan dynasty the Mongolians own China, will run China. The idea was there is no Mongolian Korean dynasty. Though, as we'll see in a second, the Mongols try to create one to try to end this guerrilla warfare. And so what Korea did was pay for the invasions of Japan. Koreans were carted off as slaves to China for use in manufacturing, mining. They just picked them up and carted them off. This is one way you try to end the guerrilla war, by the way, is get rid of the people. Russia does this in the Baltic against Swedish and German and Finnish people in the 1700s. You cart off the people. The cities were ruined by siege, and then the guerrilla war by the reprisals. Confucianism, hierarchy, traditionalism increased, which makes sense. And it makes sense because this was native, whereas the Mongols are foreigners. And so Confucianism takes on, even though it's from China, it's so old in Korea that it takes on this non-foreign concept. Buddhism, on the other hand, with its emphasis on the individual, decreased. And this makes sense because Korea was getting poorer. You had to rely on more. You had to rely on each other more. And so Buddhism's emphasis on personal happiness, personal path to enlightenment is less compatible with the way of life going on in Korea at this point under the Mongols. Yuan elite do marry Korean women and do try to link Korea into the Yuan dynasty, but ultimately it's too far. Korea is just too far away from the Silk Road, from the great trade routes that go from central China into the steppe, past Mongolia, into Central Asia, into the Middle East. It's just too far. It's like Japan. It is at the end of these routes. And so the economics, the road systems, the trade systems are simply not built to go into Korea. They're built to go into Central Asia, into the West. And so Korea remains devastated, remains poor, while the Mongols run China, while the Mongols are the Yuan. All right, so that's the end of this episode, and that's the effects of the Mongols. In our next episode, we're going to talk about Yuan China, and we'll see what they do. And then we'll talk about Ming China, the independent China, China for the Chinese. That will be our next lecture. Thank you.